E41 Marketplace Ministries. It's all about your business, and it's all about our Father's business. It's ministry outside the box. No matter what your role is in the business world, E41 Ministries is a special place where we can walk worthy of the vocation wherewith we are called, just as Ephesians 4:1 commands us. In today's busy and frenetic world, it's a blessing to know that God has a plan to bring hope, comfort, and peace through Marketplace Ministry. The E41 Marketplace Ministry of the Fellowship, it's a kingdom-building business.
Hi, I'm Kerry Fink, and together with Dave Robinson, we're here for the E41 Marketplace Fellowship. And we're so excited today to have our great guest, Dr. Dean Spitzer. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. It's
Great
good to have you here. And we're going to have an exciting discussion about all the things that are possible and all the things that are happening in E41 Marketplace Fellowship. But we need to explain, if you're new to the show, what exactly E41 Fellowship really is. And so I'm going to ask you, Dave, because it's really an exciting thing. It has to do with Ephesians 4:1. But let you give kind of a quick overview of everything that's about.
Delighted to be here with you, Kerry. And E41 came out of Ephesians 4:1, walk worthy in the vocation wherein you are called. And so E41 is about a fellowship of marketplace ministers, not just marketplace leaders, but I believe that if you have a call, and a few verses later in Ephesians 4, the church leaders were to equip the saints. What saints? Ephesians 4:1 saints, for the work of the ministry. So if you have a calling and you're to be equipped for ministry, then in my world, you are a full-time minister of the gospel as you go out into the marketplace. So the fellowship is an organization started in 1962 by Gordon Lindsay in Dallas, along with 18 other men at the Baker Hotel. And Gordon also started the Christ for the Nations Bible Training Center at the same time. So the fellowship has been around for a long time, and it's now including as full members leaders in the marketplace who are there to extend the kingdom through their calling.
Yeah, and one of the things that we were talking about is that it really provides a bridge between the folks that are in the pulpit on Sunday morning and the church leadership that's happening on Sunday morning, and also the people who are in the congregation. Because as we talked about, there sometimes is this disconnect. We go to church on Sunday, so we have our church life there, and then the rest of the week we're in the marketplace and in the workplace. And the whole idea of E41 Fellowship is to bridge that gap so that what's happening on the Sunday is then actually being amplified as the people who heard the message on Sunday are walking out Monday through Saturday to be able to do that. So one of the things is it's interesting that we have an opportunity to have two leadership experts who are talking about this. And just before we began the program, it was interesting to hear the dialogue because Dr. Dean Spitzer has spent his career as an author and a leadership expert. And before we go farther, maybe tell us a little bit about your whole background and just what you do and the kind of organizations that you've helped, because it started with this conversation of church leaders and business leaders.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've spent all of my career pretty much helping organizations become more effective in the areas of training, leadership development, and general organizational development. I've written 8 books on various subjects relating to organizational effectiveness, including books on organizational motivation, measurement, performance management. And I have about 40 years of experience in the workplace. And I find this initiative particularly exciting because I have tried to translate my spiritual values into workplace values, and it's often been very difficult. So I think this initiative is very, very powerful because there are so many believers, so many Christians who really want to make a difference. And like Dave was saying, most people don't perceive themselves as ministers. They don't perceive themselves as apostles of God in the workplace. And the opportunities are so enormous. And so, using some of the secular knowledge and the spiritual knowledge and bringing it together holistically is a powerful prescription for improving both our spiritual organizations and our secular organizations.
It was really fascinating because at the outset, just before the camera started rolling, and we were talking about leadership, and you, Dave, were talking about how you really spent your lifetime bridging the gap of leadership in the church and leadership in the business world, and that your experience has really tackled both. I mean, could you give just a little bit of a glimpse into that?
Sure. People often ask me, how do you run a church and run a business at the same time? And I said, well, if you understand leadership, you don't run anything. You lead things and you hire people to run things. And so when you make that shift from managing to leading, then you can have a lot broader influence when you lead instead of manage. Because when you manage, you have to be there, you have to have hands-on. But when you lead, you want influence. And it's not the influence you have when you're on site. It's the influence you have after you leave that really counts. And so I just have always been in a place where God has had me between the marketplace and the church world, and I often thought that God was a little confused because I used to ask him from time to time, can't you make up your mind? Where do you want me, in the marketplace or in the church? And so when this whole thing started about 9 years ago, when I sold my RV dealership, and I said, God, what do you want me to do? And he said, I want you to become a leadership coach for leaders in the marketplace and leaders in the church world. And he said, now you understand why I gave you 40 years experience in both, because now you know how to bring them together. And that's my passion, is to help create this bridge. And the E41 Fellowship is to help build a bridge between marketplace leaders, church leaders, and together as one team for world evangelism.
You know, it is very interesting because a lot of times we have these discussions about, you have professional clergy, the people who run the church and are responsible for the business of the church and making sure all the needs of the church are met and fulfilled. And then you have the people who are just as committed, who show up on Sundays and every other time that there's something that's going on that the church needs help with. But then they track back to their workplaces on the Monday through Saturday thing. And one of the challenges is, as we operate in a increasingly politically correct world, it presents a lot of challenges for people to incorporate faith. Now, you said that you had, one of the things that you had been able to do, or you found really an attractive part of what you do, is trying to work that aspect of it into when you talk to different companies. Now, I know we had lunch some weeks back, and you were telling me about an opportunity you had recently to travel to China, and they were very interested in learning some of the techniques that you helped put together that were really helping, major companies improve their performance. But how do you react when you go to a different culture, a different setup? How are you able to take the things that you know and work those into the marketplace?
Oh, well, these principles and lessons are universal. And I found, and I'm sure Dave will agree with this, is that when people hear about good leadership, good organizational principles, it makes so much sense. I mean, they are so hungry, because everybody, from the time that you grow up in a family, you go to school, you go to church or synagogue or a spiritual organization, you go into the workplace, everybody realizes that these organizations are very poorly developed. They run very ineffectively. And so, the opportunity for improvement in all of those organizations is enormous. Most of the problems that we have in society and in the world are due to ineffective organizations. Everything from, companies to government to nations, they're all organizations. And yet nobody has really developed them, put in the systems that will really make them work effectively. And Dave mentioned leadership. It's very interesting, because I believe that what a good leader does intuitively is that they install in their organizations good systems so that they don't have to do much managing. And to me, that's if you want to find out who a good leader is, you don't look for the charismatic individual. You look for the person who has made that organization self-sustaining. So to me, the primary mark of a good leader is an organization that will run by itself and run effectively by itself. And the degree to which that organization demonstrates that maturity is the degree to which that leader is effective. And it's interesting because, in churches, you find that if the pastor leaves, not only do the congregants often not show up, but the organization doesn't run very well because it's all dependent on the leader. So to me, leadership independent organizations are actually the mark of the true leader.
Interesting. I know one of the things that Dave has talked about is we were talking about his background. He ran the missions department for the fellowship and really developed it. We're in 60
nations.
60 nations now. And I was teasing him. I said, I think you told me it was how many days on the road last year?
287.
287. Wow. So literally all over the world. And one of the things that was really interesting, because it was almost the genesis of the whole idea of the E41 Marketplace Fellowship, was the fact that when he would go to these mission fields, the need is so great. And what's the first thing a mission, well, we need more support. Can we call the mainland and get more support? Mm-hmm. We need help. So one of the things that Dave, as a business leader, had always said, well, can't we find some way that we can work the marketplace into this, which really ties back, as we were talking about, to first century church anyway. And I just want you to comment a little bit on your experience on that level as well.
I heard from almost day one when I took over the missions department that the greatest need that all missionaries have, and if you listen to most pastors, is more money. And I said, money is never a problem. Money is always the answer. Ecclesiastes 10:19 says, money answereth all things. So money can't be a problem and an answer at the same time. And I said, you probably have some problems. We need to figure out what those are, and then God will flow the money, because God's not broke. He brought Israel out of Egypt loaded with the wealth of Egypt for one reason, to show them and to show the church today that He owns all the resources, and He will get them to us if we get our problems straightened out. And so in every nation, there is enough wealth to evangelize that nation. But you can't get enough of that wealth by just taking offerings. He wants us to be in the marketplace bringing real value. And then I heard the church for years talk about the great transfer of wealth from the wicked to the righteous. Mm-hmm. It happens every payday. God takes money from unbelievers and gives it to believers to help support not just their income for their family and their future, but to help support their kingdom calling within the marketplace.
It's fascinating since you're both experts on leadership, it's interesting how you both come at the problem and attack it from the standpoint that what really needs to happen is there's a way to create that. And so what I mean by that is when you're talking about the pastor, there's a real opportunity for what is happening when he has the flock gathered together to really then motivate and develop an organization, which is the people in the congregation, to really carry the message out into the marketplace. That's part, isn't it, of the whole vision of E41 Marketplace Fellowship, is to help define and develop and assist those pastors in really fully utilizing the best resource that they have, which is the people who are part of the organization, right?
Obviously, the people are the ones that do most of the work. Mm-hmm. But the context or the environment in which the people work is really, I find, the most important thing, because you give me 10 people, 100 people, mm-hmm. they can accomplish very little or they can accomplish a great deal. What is the difference? And I believe the difference is obviously leadership, but it's what the leader does with the organization. And almost no leaders that I've found really understand the concept of organizational systems, how to create an organization that not only makes them obsolete or limits their job so that they can go on and do other things and found other organizations, but enables the people in the organization to be so much more than they could be individually. You know, one of the concepts of organizations is synergy. Synergy means that the group is more than the sum of the individuals. And I've seen so many organizations, and churches are a perfect example of this, where, you know, you put people together and they're stepping on each other's toes, there's chaos, they're really accomplishing very little. It's not only ineffective, but it's very inefficient. But there are other organizations that are extremely effective and efficient. And the question is, what makes the difference? And I believe that the difference is the systems, things like the organizational structure, the motivation and reward system, how work is delegated, the measurement of work, the monitoring of what goes on, the quality assurance systems and things like that. So I think that is so critical. And yet, where in churches do people learn that skill to create an organization as opposed to just hire a good leader? And, you know, as I said before, you know, one of the big tests of organizational effectiveness is, can you take that leader out once they've done their thing, and the organization should be able to run by itself without missing a beat.
Yeah, now isn't that becomes really difficult in a church environment, right? Because the pastor typically, as you guys were talking about, is a charismatic leader. So the people are attracted to perhaps his style of preaching and, hey, I feel like I'm being fed in this particular environment. And yet at the same time, then that poor pastor, we read about it all the time, the pastors quit in droves because they feel like they're just being buried alive. So you have spent so much of your career, your whole consulting is coaching for ministers. How do you talk to tired pastors? Because I assume the answer is we're heaping more on our own shoulders than we should be, and we're not using the model the way that Dean is saying that we should really build the organization, which would be utilizing the human resources that we have connected with the church.
I believe that, as I shared with a group of about 300 pastors in South Africa last May, I said, how many of you are looking for a staff member right now? About a third of them. I said, let me encourage you to quit looking for a package and start looking for a gift. And that got their attention, and they wanted to know what's the difference. To me, especially in the church world, we should understand how giftings really are so important to getting a person in the right place. If you do not have an apostolic gift, then you are going to be part of managing whatever organization you have, because they are basically managers take care of what leaders create. And so leadership flows on a continuum between chaos and order. Leaders create chaos. Managers create order. And so it's that constant tension that keeps a company or an organization or a church in a healthy position. Why pastors quit by the droves, and I think the last figure I saw is about 1,500 a month in America, is because they have a shepherd's gift in the senior position where they're expected to create the future. And that's not the gift they have that motivates them. So when I see a person in a senior position, the first thing I want to know is, what gift do you have? Do you have a gift that is a real leadership gift, or do you have a gift that's a management gift? And that helps determine where they should be positioned.
And I assume that one thing that a lot of pastors would probably tell you is, but I don't even have the staff I need. So I'm really having trouble managing my volunteers because they say they're going to show up and all that. How do you guys address that? Because I'm sure in the whole question of motivating and making this communication work so that we really are achieving what we envision as E41 Marketplace Fellowship, how do we talk to pastors about issues like that?
Well, the most difficult problem with delegation, why delegation is so difficult, is because the expectations are not clear up front. You have to know not only what are you supposed to do, but what constitutes the right outcomes. Mm-hmm. And how do you know if you're being successful? That's one of the reasons why a few years ago I wrote a book on performance measurement, because I discovered that one of the things that was causing all the chaos in organizations was poor measurement systems. Mm-hmm. You reward and manage what you measure. And churches and spiritual organizations have the worst measurement systems because they don't think it's important. Mm-hmm. If you ask, how do you know, what are your goals? How do you measure your goals? How do you know if you're accomplishing? They'll say, well, we're growing. How many commitments for Christ have you made, and things like that? But there's so much more to measurement than that. So if you have clear, measurable expectations, you have a good feedback system and lots of indicators to let people know how they're doing, then people are going to be able to do things. But unfortunately, what we do is we tend to say, okay, here's your task, do it. Mm-hmm. And that leads to what Dave was saying about chaos. So we have, in most organizations, we have people who have tasks, and they don't know, they don't really have direction. Mm-hmm. So direction requires clear expectations, indicators of success, some good measures, and that way you can monitor what people are doing. And people, in fact, if you have a good measurement system, people know exactly what they're doing. They don't need much supervision. Supervision is actually the more supervision that's necessary means that there's less organizational system effectiveness. So the more you have good organizational systems, the less supervision you need. And at a certain point, you don't need any supervision at all.
Yeah, if everybody is sort of tasked with a vision. Now, you look like you were going to jump in on that, because it's so core to this.
Well, it's unfortunate that everything has been dumped on the desk of the pastor in the church world. And that means he has to create the future and manage the present. And whatever you focus on the most is what you're going to produce the most of. Mm-hmm. So if you focus mostly on what you have today, you're going to get more of what you have today. Well, that energizes a shepherding gift. Mm-hmm. He lives to touch and help people and care for people, but it doesn't create the future. And so that takes a different gift. And so when you have the shepherding gift in a senior position in a church situation, then the people are going to be well cared for, but who knows where the next green pasture is? Well, I don't know. Let's take a vote, or however we're going to arrive at that. Mm-hmm. It happens in the marketplace too. Absolutely. When you have a shepherding gift that somehow gets into the senior position after the first or second generation, because I can guarantee you there was an apostolic gift that created that. The marketplace calls it the entrepreneurial gift. I see all 5 gifts in the marketplace every day. And the CEO's office is the apostolic gift. In the HR department is the teacher and the prophet. The teacher teaches you what you have to do and how to do it. The prophet makes sure we're all in compliance. And then the shepherds are by the hundreds in large corporations. They're the people who put their arm around you and love on you and say, this is a great place to work. I know you just got chewed out, but that's okay. His bark's not as bad as his bite or whatever. And then in the sales and marketing department, we have the evangelistic gift that creates a sense of urgency. So to me, effectiveness in the marketplace is the same as in the church world. But if you're working with unbelievers, then you have to change the terminology a little bit. But anyhow, it all works around the gift because God gave gifts to men.
So if you have people with gifts, with a variety of gifts, and you have an organization that has good systems, you've got everything.
Yeah, I was going to dare say we could probably pick the smallest church that we could find, a handful of members, or we could take the largest mega church or whatever we think of. And I'll bet the commonality is that they have wonderful people in them, and that it's really a question of organizing those gifts so that they're really hitting the maximum effectiveness. And that's using the power that exists within the people who are part of the church staff and connecting them correctly with the people that are there Sunday, and then creating that system where this is happening on an ongoing basis to really increase the whole effectiveness of it. And I think that's what E41 Marketplace Fellowship is all about. I really appreciate the time that we've been able to spend on this, and I hope this is the beginning of a series of discussions about that, because I think there's so much that pastors can learn, business leaders can learn, and it will just drive the effectiveness of the church, and that's by whatever metric you want to call it. I would just say in terms of expanding the footprint of the kingdom, which is something that everybody who goes to the church would argue that we're all in favor of, and particularly when we go out into what may be considered oftentimes a hostile environment where we're not always welcomed with with a Christian view or whatever. So this is a dialogue that needs to continue, and I think the forum here for the E41 Marketplace Fellowship is a great way to do that. And particularly when we're blessed to have expert in the kind of work that you've been able to do in the corporate world, but also in the organizational world, it's a phenomenal thing.
And I would challenge all the leaders out there, all the organizational people out there, to ask yourself, how do you determine your success? What are the measures of success? Mm-hmm. Just like in body health, there are vital signs. Mm-hmm. Does your organization have vital signs that tell you that it's healthy? So to me, organizational health is so, so important.
Okay, we have just about a minute left, but let me ask the question. If you would look at a camera directly and say, I want to speak to the senior pastor, here's the one thing I'd like for you to think about after hearing what we've been talking about. This is the number one thing I'd like for you to focus in on and think about how you could take this and make this work for you.
Okay, there are actually a couple of things. The first thing is, would your organization be able to run without you? Does it have the systems in place so that you could step away for a week or a month, mm-hmm. and you would feel confident that the organization would run reasonably well? Another thing is, as I said, what are your measures of success? How do you know if your organization as a whole is successful, but also the different ministries within the organization are successful? And the other thing I would ask is, are you as a leader focusing on strategic rather than purely operational things? Are you looking at the future of your organization, the direction of your organization, not what's happening on a daily basis?
Excellent. Dave, we're going to wrap it up here, but I think that's wonderful set of questions for pastors. Would you add anything for that?
Yeah, I'd just like to say to any pastor that's looking today, God has given you very gifted people in your church to help you accomplish what He's called you to do. And I would encourage you to find a way to work together so that the kingdom can be established on this earth.
That's great. It's E41 Marketplace Fellowship, and we hope that you're part of this as we go forward. Thanks, guys, for being with us today, and we look forward to continuing this discussion. It's a great place to start.